Hello everyone. Now if you're like me, you've been playing a lot of popular games like Modern Warfare 2, Fortnite, or possibly Overwatch as well. And after a while you probably got bored. So during the time I was trying to look for new games to try out, I decided to go to a website that I visited prior called Abandonware. The website contains games that are no longer sold by the company or online, hence the term Abandonware. Now I've only tried out 2 games during my first visit to the website, which are Land of the Dead, Road to Fiddler's Green, and Manhunt 2. However, I decided to look into more obscure titles, such as Saw the Game, Shellshock 2, Clive Barker's Jericho, and Darkest of Days, which are games that I've always wanted to try out on the Xbox 360 when I still had it as a little kid. I'll be discussing all 4 games and what they have to offer in terms of their own lore and gameplay, so let's get into it. The Saw franchise came out with a game on October 6, 2009. It was originally being developed by Brash Entertainment, but was later moved on to Zombie Studios and published by Konami. The game takes place after the events of the first movie when Detective Tapp gets shot in the chest by Zepp and was later healed by Jigsaw. But in the process he put a key inside Tapp and was later put into an abandoned asylum. Inside you'll encounter people who want to kill you for your key, traps to escape from, and people to save. Both returning characters from the movies and new characters that weren't present in the movies, who are Jennings Foster, Melissa Singh, and Oswald McGillicuddy. As you explore the asylum, you'll see people who were placed in the traps become mutilated corpses for show in the building, even featuring references from the movies, which looks pretty cool for the details for the setting and the game. There's even some lore about the asylum when it was still functional. You can find some notes from doctors and patients talking about their experience in the asylum and even the usage of MKUltra. Plus, the game's atmosphere really matches how a Saw movie would turn out, with an abandoned asylum being the perfect setting for the game, since Jigsaw prefers to put his victims into abandoned buildings where law enforcement probably wouldn't think to look. Sometimes, whenever I found a camera, I would just use it to add to the horror, but later on I just ended up using the flashlight as my main since the horror is already good enough, but overall it holds up for a game made in 2009. You'll also hear Jigsaw constantly taunting Tapp in his obsession with catching him, even going as far as to blame him for the death of his partner, Detective Singh. Even references as to what happened to them when they both try to arrest Jigsaw.
911, what is your emergency?
2 officers are down at 213 Stygian Street. You must hurry.
Help has been dispatched. Sir, are you with the officers right now?
Detective Singh has been shot. I don't think he's going to make it. The other has an injury, but he'll live.
What kind of injury, sir?
Nothing he can't handle. He should have called for backup.
Sir, do you know who perpetrated these assaults?
The world is a dangerous place.
But speaking of putting the blame on Tapp, the same goes for the people that you're supposed to save in the game. After freeing them from the trap Jigsaw placed them in, they start talking shit on Tapp and blame them for the reason why they were kidnapped by Jigsaw in the first place. They either run off and tell you to go fuck yourself, or something bad happens to them when they try to follow you. It made me think about some kind of companion type of system where you would have to guide them to a safe spot or the exit. But something like that probably wouldn't work in this game.
Stop hitting me.
But still, even after all that bullshit they say to you, it's like, was it even worth going through the trouble to save this person? All Tapp got was the person saying, "We're all here because of you, detective."
We're all here because of you, detective.
You know what, Tapp? We're all here because of you.
We're all here because of you, detective. I wish you were. I wish you hadn't saved me from that thing. I wish I were dead too.
Okay. Ain't so damn funny now, is it?
Like, God forbid someone tries to find the source of the crime then put a stop to it. The only one that seems to understand you and show a bit of compassion is Oswald. Even though he still kind of blames you for what happened to him and calls you a scumbag dirty cop, he seems to regret it right after and decides to follow you.
What did he look like? I don't know. I remember checking my mail, then going to get some water, and maybe I was wrong about you. I didn't.
I think I know who Jigsaw is. I think he's in this place. We just need to find him.
Too bad he fucking dies though. Amanda tries to follow you as well, but she just ends up leaning towards Jigsaw than you.
Play by the rules, and we both might make it. He's watching.
You already survived 1 trap by him. How can
Clearly, I failed the test, though. That's why he brought me back here, and with a fucking cop, no less. Just be sure of this. Jigsaw's in control, not you, detective.
which isn't a surprise since she's one of Jigsaw's apprentices in the movie, so I guess it does make sense. But that's still no excuse to blame the person who literally fucking saved you. It's seriously annoying. Obi is much worse though. He tries to scold Tab for not accepting Jigsaw's gift when he literally killed his partner and ruined his life. Like, what the fuck do you want him to do, dumbass?
You're throwing away your life chasing Jigsaw. Can't you see he's giving you a gift? The opportunity to live life without this obsession? You lack perspective. I can't stand by as you throw away this gift from Jigsaw.
It's no wonder why he got burnt alive in the second movie. Fucking hell, but anyway, let's move on to the combat. There's a good amount of weapons you can find scattered around the asylum, and the cool part about it is how you can use some of the tools around the asylum as weapons, like the crutches, mop handles, scalpels, and lead pipes. The only problem is the combat system is dog shit, which is pretty much the major setback of the game. Tab can barely swing for the life of him, and you have to resort to spamming the attack button in hopes of actually getting a hit on the enemy. However, this only works with your fists, which at this point is probably one of the most effective weapons in the game, since you can just spam it at enemies. Plus, the enemies are just really dumb. They run up to you like they're asking you to kill them, but at the same time they'll swing at you faster than you can ever imagine with any weapon they have, or just spam the fists. If you're using the revolver, they're just lining up to get shot at that point. A better alternative is to block at the right time, which triggers a quick time event sequence and instantly kills the enemy, with the only trade-off being you lose your weapon in the process. But most of the time you can just pick up whatever the enemy drops. Some enemies have traps on them as well, like the Venus fly trap or the bear trap, so there's also the option to wait it out and watch them die. You can also use traps to kill enemies if you're feeling a little creative, like shotgun tripwires, electrified water, gas, explosives, and stun traps as well. Bonk! But like I said, the enemies are pretty dumb, so you'll have an easy time getting kills with the traps. Although sometimes the enemies carry explosives on their hands as well, so in case of that, keep your distance when that happens, of course. I found it funny how the pighead, who basically appears like a boss, can easily be killed with the electric trap nearby. It basically requires little to no effort, but probably involves a little juking. Dude's been on your ass by kidnapping you and jump scaring you and all that shit, only just to be taken down by electricity. But it's not a bad thing though, I just found it funny. Midway into the game, you'll get captured by the pighead and get a shotgun collar put on you. There's other enemies who also have the shotgun collar, which means that if you happen to encounter one of them, the trap will start to go off and you'll have to run away and find some place to lock yourself in or kill them quickly. It's basically the same thing as the enemies with the bear traps and stuff, except you're affected. And depending on how you handle those situations, it's probably going to be the waiting game except the loser dies. Overall, the combat system is handled pretty poorly, but the counterattack alternative and the traps make it more bearable to deal with. You don't have to kill everyone and can avoid enemies for sure, but if you're doing something like a pacifist run, you're gonna have to kill someone eventually to progress through the game. As for the puzzles in the game, they're pretty cool and a lot of them are handled pretty well. Although most of them are pretty much the same with the pipes, circuit boxes, and gears, I thought it was alright. However, one can argue that it can feel repetitive and stuff, which is a valid and understandable criticism. Most of the puzzles are death traps, which are mandatory for you to solve to progress through the game aside from the main ones, which are bomb rooms and gas rooms, so of course, make sure you're prepared for those and keep a few health hypos just in case the gas starts beating your ass. There's also optional puzzles which can help you out, like the jigsaw chest, weapon cabinets, and door lock picking. They can provide you with weapons, tools for traps, and health hypos, which can be pretty helpful, but like I said, they're optional, so you can live without them, of course. The main traps you're supposed to free people from are fine, but they can get a little frustrating, which of course is to be expected since Jigsaw is not going to let you off that easy. All of them have this sort of thing where it just shows you the trap nearly about to kill them, which I guess is to try to pressure you to act fast and say, hey, this person is going to die if you don't do something, motherfucker, which is okay, but it can get a little annoying sometimes if you're stuck on a certain puzzle. The ones I struggled with the most were Oswald's trap and Jeff's. Both of them are RNG based, which makes it a bit more harder and frustrating. If you fail, you'll have to start over with a randomized set of the puzzle, and it's like, what the fuck, bro? Especially with the circuit boxes and Oswald's trap, where you have to look at the big ass box and figure out the right pattern to see which one connects to the other. And by the time you've analyzed the last circuit box completely, you'll probably have a minute or less to put everything together depending on how fast you are. As for Jeff's trap, it's basically just a dangerous game of trial and error. You have to figure out which TV matches with the other, but if you get the wrong one, which you most likely will, Jeff gets impaled by one of the spikes on the wall, and since the symbols on the TVs have randomized positions, it's probably going to be a fucking hassle at that point because it feels like it's luck based. But I guess it does make sense for something like this to be in the game since it is Saw after all. If you are considering trying this game out, my advice for the traps is to not panic and jump all over the place. Pay attention to the puzzle and don't rush. If you fail, just keep at it and you'll have a better understanding of what you're doing, and you probably won't even have to think to solve it once you try it again. After saving everyone and going through all those enemies and puzzles, you're left with 2 doors to choose from. Truth and Freedom, both requiring the same key to open. Once you go through Jigsaw's final obstacle course, get the key and solve a double death puzzle, you can finally pick one of the endings. The Freedom ending allows Tab to leave the asylum alongside everyone else still trapped in there and ending the search for Jigsaw, making him still on the loose. He goes back to his apartment feeling overwhelmed with the fact that he couldn't catch Jigsaw and failed his mission. Then he gets a gun and kills himself. In the Truth ending, Jigsaw gives you the chance to finally catch him, however at the cost of everyone still trapped inside the asylum. You start to chase him while he tries to block your path, go into the roof and actually catching him, only to realize that the person in the cloak is actually Melissa, not John Kramer. It's revealed that Jigsaw forced Melissa to disguise as him and set up traps against Tab as he continues to try to catch Jigsaw in order to see her son again, while at the same time sewing her mouth shut so Tab wouldn't realize that wasn't him the whole time. Suddenly she gets caught in a shotgun tripwire trap and dies. Tab goes through a mental breakdown right after and is put in an actual mental asylum where he remains insane. They didn't really touch on the Truth ending, but I guess it does make sense since it's not really canon to the storyline. But basically both endings are just a lose-lose situation and Tab suffers either way. But the Freedom ending does make more sense and is canon with the Saw storyline. I do understand that Jigsaw was obviously not going to let Tab catch him, but it just still feels depressing knowing that he's gone through all that just for it to lead to nothing. But at least in the canon ending, he did save a good amount of people. I looked into this game a bit more though, and I discovered some cool concept art and cut content. There was originally going to be some sort of co-op mode shown in this picture of this graphical user interface here. I think this image is also part of the co-op feature since it has another health bar on the top right of the screen. Another similar instance is how in this video found in the files of the game, Amanda is seen with Tab during Jennings' trap, which could be part of the co-op mode as well or something like a companion system which I mentioned earlier, but they scrapped it and replaced it with Amanda being taken away of course. Dr. Gordon was also planned to be in the game but was scrapped due to what appears to be Lionsgate's doing as shown in this article. And they also said they had a story outline planned for a third Saw game, but I couldn't find anything about that so far. It also looks like Dr. Gordon was going to be an enemy as shown in this video, but that wouldn't make any sense considering his roles in the movie, so he was scrapped for a good reason. There's also some dialogue relating to Dr. Gordon, which is an audio tape about Jigsaw putting him in another test.
Dr. Gordon, I want to play a game. You escaped the test I set for you, but not your fate. You did not follow the rules. Shooting your cellmate was your task, and you failed. You refused to cause harm to others, so perhaps you will preserve life instead. In this asylum, 8 people are facing their own tests. Assist them in using the methods I have laid out for you in these documents. Follow the rules, and you will survive. Do not break them. When the clock strikes 6, you and your family will be released from this place. Save his life, Dr. Gordon.
There's also a good amount of unused models, a majority of them wearing pig masks aside from Dr. Gordon. I'm assuming these were either different enemies similar to the pighead in the final game, or considering the co-op element and the other victim models, some kind of versus or escape mode. Probably something like survive the pigheads until the police arrive or escaping from a certain area. Although something like this is already in Dead by Daylight, it would have been cool to see an actual Saw game have these types of modes implemented. There's even more in the character concept video I found in the files in the game as well, like an armored pighead, another in a white suit, and Tab's original outfit which consists of a shoulder holster and a different shirt before later being changed in the final version. There's also different types of common enemies like this one who appears to be wielding an arm blade used by Jigsaw in the first movie and some kind of trap with hooks. This one looks similar to the shotgun collar trap, but I don't know if it works the same way. But if you do want to check this stuff out for yourself, the links to the cut content can be found in the description below and in the game files if you're trying this game out. A second game was released a year after called Saw 2 Flesh and Blood, but apparently it's worse than this one. Still, I'm surprised it even had a second game to begin with, since a lot of people disliked the first one from what I've seen. It doesn't have a PC port sadly, so I can't really try this game out for myself, but we have emulation at least, so I'll probably make a video on that if I ever do feel like it. Overall, if you're a fan of the Saw franchise, or like solving puzzles in general, I'd say give this game a shot.
White Knight, man to animal, brother against brother. They're nothing. Puppet soldiers, enough to stop war.
Sir, I have to warn you, we have a number of incidents reported up ahead.
God, there you dead.
They get in here, I'll make sure I do all of us before they get us.
Everywhere! They're fucking everywhere! Worker 12, you copy, over!
Shellshock 2 Blood Trails is a Vietnam War survival horror shooter released in February 13, 2009. It was developed by Rebellion, the guys behind Sniper Elite, and published by Eidos Interactive, which would later be acquired by Square Enix. The game's plot consists of some French guy named Pierre Dumont creating a contagious bioweapon that turns people into crazed zombies in 1968. He attempted to sell it to the US military to give them an advantage for the Vietnam War, claiming that it would make the Viet Cong turn rabid and kill each other. But the generals rejected the offer, afraid that the bioweapon would spread throughout the globe and claimed that it would be ineffective. He got pissed and was later flown to Cambodia in a transport plane, carrying the virus. The plane somehow gets into a crash and gets lost somewhere deep into the jungles of Cambodia. The protagonist of the previous game, Nom 67, who's Cal Walker, is sent to retrieve the cargo from the crashed plane alongside his Special Forces squad. They get attacked by the infected plane crew and Cal gets captured by Dumont, where he later gets infected and becomes a carrier for the White Knight virus. He comes out of the jungle alone after some time and gets put into a US base in Pleiku. You play as Cal's brother, Nate Walker, and get brought in by Sergeant Jack Griffin to get information about White Knight from Cal. An attack from the Viet Cong suddenly happens and Cal is able to break free, killing and infecting any soldiers that come across his path. You also get these visions of Cal doing this and spreading the infection wherever he goes, which is weird. It doesn't really make any sense as it just happens out of nowhere. But yeah, you go on this journey to find him before he spreads White Knight even further. You're also being tracked down by some guy named Trang, who is a Vietnamese Special Forces officer also trying to find Cal for White Knight. Basically, it's just the Agent Orange situation, but with a zombified twist. I went and played the previous game after beating this one, and the plot just already seems so out of place. It's like they said, fuck it, let's just add zombies in Vietnam for no reason at all. Now I get the game has a reason as to why there's a zombie outbreak all of a sudden in Vietnam, but it just feels like it came out of nowhere. The characters aren't even interesting either, they're just there. I mean, sure, there's Griffin, who's your Sarge, and pretty much acts like a dickhead. Also, he's technically Arthur Morgan. Rupert, who's some idiot agent for some other person named Serena. And speaking of her, she's introduced to you for like a minute, and not long after, she just dies. Although you do technically meet her again in the trip level where she just taunts you and says you're as good as dead.
You're as good as dead. Xanax down, the skates, just you and all those infected down there waiting for you. Hell, it'd be something to survive even if you wasn't tripping out of your mind.
As for Trang, I guess he's supposed to be the main villain, but he just feels like any other enemy you're supposed to kill. I mean, yeah, he's trying to capture Cal for White Knight, but so is the US military, so there's nothing worth looking forward to this character either. Same thing with Griffin when he gets infected. It's like, okay, he turned into a zombie, that's cool I guess. The characters only exist to give the game a reason to keep going and are in no way interesting at all. Everyone just shows up and dies right after. They're just completely meaningless at this point. The gameplay isn't really much better either, it's just very bland. I mean, gunplay looks okay, but the same can't be said for how it works. It feels really sluggish and guns have no recoil whatsoever unless you aim, which is just the reverse of how aiming and shooting from the hip actually work. You can easily one-tap enemies with little to no effort at all, and while it was funny at first, it just got boring inevitably. You can just plow through people and the guns don't feel any different at all except for the shotgun and the RPG, which you only use like once I think. The most powerful weapon in the game is the M60, and if you find it, you're pretty much set for almost the whole level since you can easily one-tap enemies in the head like I said. But I did find it weird how you can only carry 90 rounds when the magazine holds 100. That's pretty dumb. The grenades are also just weird. One moment they'll work somewhat and in the other it just won't. Most of the time you'll need to throw 2 grenades to kill enemies straight up, and the throw distance is bad so you'll need to get close if you want to hit something with the grenades. But because of the hipfire one-taps I barely use them. But speaking of the enemies though, they're somewhat okay I guess. Finding the Vietnamese soldiers are pretty straightforward and they're just another generic shooty pew pew enemy. Nothing special. Same with the zombies as well, but they feel like the Viet Cong except they're armed with machetes, although I did like the sounds they make. Most of the battles with the zombies do get tense and they can overwhelm you pretty easily depending on how many there are, which is okay, but it can be pretty frustrating. If you happen to run into 7 or 10 zombies, it's just better to shoot them in the head right away instead of running, since if you sprint for like 6 to 7 seconds with the annoying head bobbing, you'll get tired quickly and the zombies can gang up on you. Especially during the village level near the end where you're stuck with a good amount of zombies with a shotgun, and the best way to play it safe is to get to high ground, which was kind of enjoyable. You can also shoot them in the leg if you want, which somehow kills them instantly, but only with a shotgun though. I've also noticed that they'll try to vomit on you and blind your screen, which only happened to me like a few times, I think, but it's a cool addition to the zombies. There's a brute-like zombie wielding 2 machetes that I guess is supposed to be the boss variant of the game. He can make a dash towards you and kill you in like 2 or 3 hits if I remember correctly, but he's just basically a bullet sponge enemy and can go down easily with an M60, nothing really special either. What I did notice about both the Viet Cong and the zombies is how they will both pop up out of nowhere behind sometimes. I got caught off guard a good amount of times by the both of them and I was like, where the hell did they even come from? It got me confused for a bit, but it wasn't too bad since it's not like they have a chance to one-tap you right away. And speaking about that, I think enemies are just too weak, or you have a lot of health in this game, so you'll probably just plow through the game without dying. Especially on hard difficulty, because I played through the whole game on that difficulty and it didn't even feel that different at all. It was just, okay soldier, shoot these guys, but this time they deal a tiny bit of damage compared to the other difficulties. You'll be fine. You can also find American soldiers that'll be around to help you out with the Viet Cong and the infected, but they're only there for a brief moment before dying or running off somewhere else, so they're not much help, but they're there I guess. You'll be fighting off enemies by yourself majority of the time anyway. However, I think the most annoying part of the game is the quick time events. All of them are scripted and just ruin the pacing of the game, or what's left of it anyway. The amount of buttons or keys you have to press depend on the difficulty, and you'd get the option to either kill the enemy or bash their head in. They look okay, but the quick time events in general just feel unneeded and unnecessary. I'm assuming they're there to drive the game with a little more length because it's already way too short. Before I knew it, I already beat the game in like less than an hour. It felt like I was speedrunning through it without even knowing. I was also thinking about mentioning the lack of variety of guns in this game, but with the length of this game, would it even matter? The levels look okay I guess, and I thought the atmosphere was alright, like the dead soldiers around the levels and zombies tearing them apart, but most of them just play the same. It's just do these constant defense sections and then get from point A to B, and it just feels so recycled and rushed. Linear games are fine obviously, but they should have added more to it instead of just defend and run. In fact, they should have added a whole lot more to this game since it just feels so bland and short. Finally, after all that mumbo jumbo, you find Cal and try to restrain him to take him to safety. Then the French guy shows up, claiming he can make the antidote for the White Knight virus, and the only way to get it and to save millions of lives is to get him out of here. Cal shoots him in the shoulder, telling you he needs to die or another outbreak will happen again. If you shoot Cal, you escort Dumont to an evac chopper while the Marines come in and finish Cal off. An antidote is created, eradicating the virus, and is later swept under the rug by the Vietnamese and American governments. Meanwhile, Dumont is hidden somewhere in the United States, presumably in an insane asylum to make sure he never causes an outbreak again. But Nate does swear to himself that he will find him and kill him. However, if you do shoot Dumont, you fly off to safety with Cal as Dumont gets torn apart by the infected. Cal still dies anyway 3 weeks later, and the virus breaches through the quarantine zone and later on spreading throughout Southeast Asia. Eventually, it becomes a global pandemic. So basically just another lose-lose situation. Save the world at the cost of your brother, and save your brother at the cost of the world. Just like the game itself, this ending feels lackluster. It just feels like they wanted the game to be over and done with. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case since it obviously feels rushed. I literally said, wow, that's it after beating it. The overall plot of Shellshock 2 is a bit interesting, I guess, but it's so poorly executed with bland characters and bland gameplay. The only thing it does decently is the atmosphere. I played through Nom 67 after beating Shellshock 2, and they are nothing alike. Literally no similarities other than both games being set during the Vietnam War and Cal being in both of them. It's like you might as well just give this game a different title. Shellshock 2 was made by a different studio instead of the original from Nom 67, but did they even look at the game or at least know about it? Of course, Nom 67 does have its blatant and noticeable flaws like the AI and weird gunplay, but it at least tried to have a personality. It did do a good job of trying to bring a dark and gritty take of the Vietnam War and did have some alright characters, more memorable than the second one. Instead of killing off their characters right away, they tried to show some insanity towards the characters with them torturing the Vietnamese and other horrible shit. Basically war crimes galore, and while it wasn't that great, it's something you can commend the original devs for. You could even talk to your squad mates, find trophies, buy contraband. Fuck, if that's your thing. They even had a radio host too, which helped make the game more alive.
Our good neighbors in Thailand are sending us some help. 2,200 troops are on their way. Be sure and welcome them to the party.
Why didn't they add stuff like that in the second game? It would have been interesting to hear soldiers panicking about zombies suddenly fucking everything up in Vietnam.
Even being in a war doesn't prepare you for this. They never stop. They come at you, and they never goddamn stop.
Or hell, add in something like a horde mode. And now I know this probably doesn't sound like a good idea, but something like holding out on your own in the military base or the jungle sounds pretty cool. The only reason why I wanted to try this game out in the first place is because the idea of a Vietnam zombie game or at least a Vietnam horror game really interested me. But after playing this game, I feel like I playtested the demonstration rather than play an actual game. Now I tried to find more information about this game, but I couldn't even find anything. It just seems like the game was left in the dust after it was released. But I did find this one comment on another video talking about the same game. Apparently, one of the developers had a dispute with the management, so they forced him to look at all these gory pictures of dead people and recreate them in the game. And it was so bad that he had to go to therapy for it because that's all he did during the development of the game. I can't really confirm this for sure, but if it is true, then it is fucked up for sure. But other than that, I have found nothing about the game. Nothing at all. But fuck it. If you do want to try out this game for whatever reason, I won't stop you, but I recommend you save yourself the boredom and play Nom 67 instead.
I'll swallow your soul!
We've been waiting an eternity for you.
Clive Barker's Jericho is a squad-based horror first-person shooter released on October 23, 2007. It was developed by Mercury Steam, Alchemic Productions, and published by Codemasters, alongside being written by Clive Barker, as from the title, the same guy who made the Hellraiser movies and some other cool stuff. The story dates all the way back to the creation of Adam and Eve. Before God created Adam and Eve, he created an entity that wasn't male nor female and even soulless, who was the firstborn. Unfortunately, God was so horrified by what he created that he abandoned it and imprisoned it to a slice of reality called the Pixis for eternity. Then he decided to start fresh by creating humanity. The firstborn is understandably angry about this and grows a deep hatred for humanity for not being given the same treatment that God gave humanity. However, since the firstborn was too powerful for even God to eradicate, it would make several attempts to escape the Pixis. 7 warriors with supernatural powers are sent to put the firstborn back into the Pixis, and each time it's sent back, it brings a piece of the earth with it. Because of this, fragments of time and space would form around it, linking to the city of Alkali in southern Arabia. The 7 warriors sent to close the breach would also be trapped inside the Pixis as well. If you are also killed inside the Pixis, you'll be taken away by flies and reanimated by the firstborn as a twisted monster. Fast forward to the Second World War, where a top-secret US Special Forces organization called the Department of Occult Warfare, originally formed to investigate and gather intelligence about Nazi Germany creating supernatural weapons, changed their purpose later on to fighting any supernatural forces that threatened humanity. A former high-ranking DOW member named Arnold Leach became a potential threat, became expelled, and had assassinations authorized against him multiple times. Leech was contacted by the Firstborn, convincing him to help it escape the Pyxis, which would lead him to form a cult called the Brotherhood of the Dark Rapture. He would later spend 20 years committing attacks and killings in Baltimore, Sydney, and London, which would charge negative energy into a karma bomb, causing the breach to be torn open. This also triggers Operation Godseal, which is a contingency plan created by the US government in case the breach is opened. The DOW's combat arm, Jericho Squad, is sent to Al-Khali to seal the breach and stop Arnold Leech. The members consist of Captain Devin Ross, Captain Xavier Jones, Father Paul Rawlings, Lieutenant Abigail Black, Sergeant Billy Church, Sergeant Frank Delgado, and Corporal Simone Cole. During the beginning of the game, Ross is killed by Leech, but his soul remains intact and can go into the minds of the other Jericho members, allowing you to use their abilities throughout the game. The Jericho Squad goes through different pocket dimensions and different time periods to stop Leech and to seal the breach. The missions in the game consist of Al-Khali, World War II, the Crusades, Ancient Rome, and Sumeria. You will also fight people who had the same treatment as Leech, such as Hanne Lichthammer, who was part of the German soldiers investigated by the DOW, Bishop Matthias St. Clair, who led a children's crusade that went horribly wrong, Governor Cassius, a disgusting cannibalistic fat bastard who just wants to feast, fuck, and kill, which makes him the only victim completely satisfied with the Pyxis, if you can even call him a victim, and 6 ancient Sumerian priests who were Ninlo, Ki, Inanna, Enlil, Nana, and Utu. They were the first to banish the Firstborn but fell victim to its corruption, becoming the bosses of the Sumerian levels. Plot's looking pretty cool so far. The characters are cool too, and the voice acting is alright as well. Sometimes they act like generic action movie protagonists with some of their lines, which isn't a bad thing, but then there's Delgado.
Hey Abby, I got a joke for you. How many telekinetic lesbian snipers does it take to clear a road? Hey, congratulations Abby! Now you finally know what it's like to have a man inside you.
Fuck you.
At that point, you can really tell that this was a game made in 2007. They provide some backstories about the characters, like Billy being forced into a mental ward for performing sanguimancy, and Rawlings being a conflicted priest. Plus, you can learn more about them in the extra section if you beat the game on hard mode. Although it isn't much, it's alright. As for the gameplay, it's so and so. The gunplay looks serviceable and it plays nice, and you have this variety of customized weapons and abilities to use against the enemies. Cole has a slow motion ability which makes it easier to take down enemies and damage bosses while their movement is slowed down. She can also activate a damage boost for the squad and herself, however, if this is left on for too long, Cole will lose touch with reality and she won't be able to use anything else for a bit. She also has grenades that can be switched from proximity, impact, and remote, alongside the attachment on her gun that allows her to spot the enemy's weak point, which can help out a lot. Both of these go very well with her infinite loop ability. She can even download ammo for the squad and give them a full refill, which reminds me of the max ammo from Call of Duty Zombies.
What kind of people can do something like this?
Delgado has a Babanili, which is a dragon spirit that incinerates enemies at the cost of arm pain alongside a fire barrier which shields him from damage and fire. And it can also damage nearby enemies, but only a tiny bit. His minigun is fun to use, but if you want to pop some heads, use his pain pistol.
Bang! I make it look easy.
Church is a Sanguimancer, which gives her the ability to create 2 wards. A blood ward that immobilizes enemies in its area, and a fire ward that incinerates any monsters in its area. Both abilities make her lose health as a trade-off. She has an MP7 and her katana to slice anyone up, but in this game, do it at your own risk depending on how many monsters and what type of monsters you're fighting. It's best to just use her blood ward and slice up anyone as fast as you can. Black can shoot a ghost bullet which can be guided to make some clean headshots and can use telekinesis to stun and burn monsters. She also has a grenade launcher on her sniper, which is unusual but it's a cool attachment for the gun. Rawlings can summon a blue sphere that can revive anyone from long distances at the expense of his health, and you're unable to use him for a bit. He can also drain health from enemies and transfer it to the squad. Rawlings is equipped with akimbo deagles which can be switched to fire standard, frangible, and explosive bullets. Jones is a seer who can use astral projection to possess enemies and use a blood ward or set them on fire. He has a G36 compact with a mounted shotgun like Ross before he got sliced up by Leech. It's pretty fun to go up to enemies and blast them away with the mounted shotgun. Some of these powers are required to progress through the game as well, like telekinesis or astral projection. In general though, using these powers are pretty fun to use, and since enemies put up a good fight, you'll be using a lot of these as you should. They're there for a reason. The powers I really liked the most were the ghost bullets and the slow motion. I made a lot of dope ass headshots with the ghost bullet and blew up monsters with grenades after slowing down time. In fact, I think Cole is the best member of the Jericho squad, and despite the low damage her gun deals, her powers and vulnerability spotting make up for it a whole lot. Rawlings is the least powerful since he is a medic of course, but that doesn't mean he's useless. His explosive and frangible bullets are pretty good against certain enemies. Although Jones is probably the strongest of the squad since it's just Billy's roars, but you can use them at any distance and finish them off with your gun. In general, everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, which makes you strategize who to use in the gunfight. Or maybe you just want to go in and fuck shit up, which is understandable, but be careful while doing so as these enemies do put up a good fight. Enemies are bullet sponges or require you to find a weak spot, which isn't too bad, and I guess it makes sense since they are monsters and there isn't a ton of them at once. While they do a good amount of damage to you, most of them will just run up to you making them an easy target to kill, and they just spawn in like someone's in control of NPCs in Gmod. Also, their heads aren't weak of course, so I do recommend you aim for the head to save yourself some bullets and from a potentially tough situation. There's moments where I just switch to Delgado and just mow down enemies with a minigun or just pop their heads off with this pistol, or with Church when I just went in and started slicing shit up. It was pretty fun. The fact that the game gives you the freedom to play whoever and however you want is pretty nice. However, the friendly AI is just terrible. They will go down all the time and you will have to constantly go and revive them since they keep going down from standing out in the open for some odd reason. It annoyingly weighs down the fighting and feels more like you're babysitting your squad mates rather than working together as a team to kill monsters. There were countless times where I was just reviving my squad more than actually killing enemies, and it was just a chore at that point, especially during boss fights where my squad mates felt like they were just lining up to get hit by the boss and I would have to come in and save the day for the 50th time. I mean, sure, you could just use Rawlings to revive someone from a distance, but his ability is slow, you need visibility to revive them, which makes you exposed to enemies, and even if you do revive someone, there's a good chance they'll just go down again. Plus, sometimes they'll just listen to your commands and sometimes they won't, and they'll just stand there and shoot at whatever monster spawns from behind, which of course leads to the babysitting. There were moments where some of them actually decided to take cover and the rest just ran into the enemy or exposed themselves completely, which regardless obviously didn't work out even with the squad trying to take cover. Quick time events are also in this game and drag down the game as well, but not as much as the AI, though of course they feel unnecessary. They should have been simple cutscenes instead of just, oh shit, look, there's a button! There was one midway into the Crusade section of the game where it was just unnecessarily long and lasted for a minute. I don't know what they were going with this, but come on, not everything needs quick time events. As for the level design, it looks pretty cool. They match the tone of the story and in general, with the gory and lifeless environments. They really did a good job with the visuals and making places look like hell itself and somewhere you would want to escape from as soon as you can. Like blood and gore everywhere, creepy areas, and the atmosphere. Although the major downside about them is that they're too linear and you can't really explore them, which is unfortunate because a lot of them look pretty damn cool. Some of them also do feel repetitive though. I noticed that some of them will look and play no different than the others, like the World War II section of the game, but it wasn't too much of a big deal since I did enjoy the visuals and the design. Overall, the looks of this game are pretty nice and still hold up for a game made in 2007, but some of the gameplay choices kinda drag it down, although as a whole, it really isn't too bad. When you make your way to the Firstborn, it's revealed to the group that if they seal the breach, they'll be trapped in the Pyxis forever like the rest of the groups. So after a dispute caused by Delgado, they decide to try to kill the Firstborn instead, since being trapped inside a twisted version of your reality for eternity is obviously bad. When they meet the Firstborn, it kills both Cole and Jones, leaving 4, technically 5 members to fight off the Firstborn. The boss fight is just a short game as Simon says. You'll have to use whatever power the Firstborn uses against you. So basically, Simon says use telekinesis, Simon says use Abominability, Simon says use Blood Ward, simple as that. After playing Simon Says with the Firstborn, Church attacks it with her katana and Leech manages to free himself from the walls, dragging the Firstborn into a tunnel of light, possibly destroying it. The rest of the Jericho members jump into the water and swim deep, escaping from the cavern, and the game ends with the sight of an ocean. The ending doesn't really explain what happened to anyone after the final stage of the game. It's most likely possible that the remaining members of the Jericho squad are still alive considering the ocean in the credits, but it doesn't really touch on what happened to Leech and the Firstborn. It does look like they both got destroyed, but it's not confirmed for sure, nor is it even talked about like I said. It just ends off with a cliffhanger. At this point, the million-dollar question is, since the breach is now what looks like to be exposed to the real world, what's gonna happen? Is the Firstborn somehow gonna come back and try to destroy humanity? It's such a bummer because I was really hooked into this game's story and I left feeling kinda disappointed not knowing what happened. Clive Barker even wanted to make a sequel to Jericho, so maybe it ended like that for the sequel to come in and explain everything that happened. But that's not happening, of course. Not even the developers have talked about something like a sequel either. There's also the case of Barker leaving other things unfinished, like one of his well-known book series, Abarat. However, Barker has issues with his health. He had severe throat polyps at some point and had to get 2 surgeries to remove them. Then in 2012, he suffered from a coma for several days after contracting toxic shock syndrome from a spill of poisonous bacteria from a visit to the dentist, nearly killing him. So those have played a huge role in the development of his work, and I do hope he's feeling better now. As for Jericho as a whole, it's a solid game and not as bad as people make it out to be. Sure, there's the bad like the terrible AI and levels being too linear, but this game can still be enjoyable. You can really tell Barker did care about this game with its cool story and the fact that it could have been one of the best horror FPS games of all time if they left this in the oven a bit longer. If there's any game that needs to be brought back, like some sort of remake or remaster, it's this one. I don't think they should make any huge changes to the story though, aside from the ending. It's as good as is, but like I said, we won't be seeing anything like that. Other than that, I highly suggest you try this game out for yourself. And I also recommend installing a mod called SMod, which overhauls the game a lot and fixes a lot of issues that the base game has. But yeah, definitely give this game a shot.
Church is down!
Black needs help!
I hate this!
Hey, congratulations, Abby! Now you finally know what it's like to have a man inside you.
Fuck you.
You're our last best chance to keep history intact, so no pressure, buddy. History's in trouble. Are you ready to save it?
Darkest of Days is a time-traveling first-person shooter released in September 7, 2009. It was made by 8 Monkey Labs and published by Phantom EFX. You play as a soldier named Alexander Morris during the Battle of Little Big Horn in the Sioux War under General Custer in 1876. Just like the actual battle, it goes south for the Americans and Morris gets shot by an arrow and Custer gets killed. Suddenly, a portal appears and a man in a futuristic outfit comes out, telling you to go through. You listen to him and go through a portal. Then you appear in some sort of headquarters and a woman called Mother appears on the screen in front of you, telling you about an organization she has a major involvement in called Chronotech. They've been able to create time-traveling technology and use it to find, research, and protect history due to the works of its founder, Dr. Rainier Coel. Mother also tells you that he's gone missing, and disturbances and strange anomalies soon follow through history, altering it and putting important people in danger, and you're tasked to prevent that from happening alongside your new partner, Agent Dexter. He helps you out with training, stuff like how to use weapons made ahead of your time, how to use a cannon, and how to deal with enemies that are supposed to survive in history. You are both tasked with protecting 2 people in different time periods. A Union soldier named Corporal Welsh in the American Civil War and a Russian army officer named Petrovich in World War I, going through historical events like the Battle of Antietam and the Battle of Tannenberg. You'll also be going through a bit of other sections, like World War II and what looks like a German POW camp, another section in the Sioux War, and Pompeii during the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Another group called the Opposition with the same technology as Chronotech will try to stop you from doing so as well. Midway into the game, a man named Dr. Victor Strinko, who was head of the Opposition, tells you that you're aiding the wrong side and assumes Mother is brainwashing Dr. Coel. He doesn't offer you to join him, but just wants to tell you that Chronotech isn't really what they seem. Overall, your missions are to keep history on the right track, protect Welsh and Petrovich, and find Dr. Coel. Basically, as you might have figured already, this is just History Channel at 3 AM the game. The story feels pretty simple and straightforward. It's like a this is happening, you need to stop it type of way. It's not really a bad thing though, but not great either. Same with the characters. You know who they are and what they want you to do, and that's it really. Although Dexter is kind of cool though. He's not a great character of course, but he's that character who's just fun to be around.
Fried chicken. I could really go for some old-fashioned fried chicken right now. And a beer.
I do wish the game expanded on the other sections more instead of majorly the Civil War and World War I. The Civil War does kind of make sense since Morris is from the 1800s and World War I looks alright, but it would have been better if we got to see more sections of the other time periods that only got like 1 or 2 missions. But the game in general has a simple story about time travel in the concept, and while not executed greatly, it's still alright. Gameplay is alright as well. The guns are kinda janky, but it's not too bad and it's still playable. You have a decent amount of guns, like around 20 guns I think, including the mounted ones, ranging from historical guns to futuristic guns. I think the most fun part of the game is how you can just wield both at the same time. Like how you could be in the Civil War, the Confederates probably think you're just some schmuck with a musket, and you just whip out a futuristic AR and start mowing them down. There's also a section in Pompeii where you get a flamethrower and just start microwaving the fuck out of the Roman soldiers in the opposition, which was pretty fun as well. The game just says, here's a futuristic gun, go fuck shit up, and that's what I like about this game.
Huh. Isn't it great to fight at the Battle of Antietam, seeing how you missed it the first time around? Yeah, you can thank me later. Take this gun and engage in some numerical adjustment out there.
Plus, enemies drop like flies too, so you'll have a good time getting through enemies. The opposition does have a little resistance to them though, with the armor and at Pompeii some kind of heavy type of enemy, but in general they're not really hard to take down. There's also an active reload mechanic in the game, which allows you to speed up your reload if you press the reload button again at the right time. Also shown in Gears, which is a perfect example of this mechanic. This is one of my favorite mechanics in a game since it feels stylish and increases the pacing of a gunfight. Gears is the only game that I know has this mechanic, and I wish more games implemented this feature. Completing missions will give you points to use for the upgrade station, where you can upgrade your mag and clip size, rate of fire, accuracy, and reload speed. You'll also encounter enemies with blue auras as mentioned before in the training station, which you'll have to either knock them out with the chaser grenades or shoot them in the leg. I don't think they have any drastic changes if they do die, but the benefits are giving you bonus points for your weapon upgrades. I do like how the areas look like actual battlefields as well, with a ton of allies on one side and a ton of enemies on the other, alongside constant gunfire adding to the ambience. Especially in the Civil War sections of the game with the cannons and stuff. Although there's gonna be some points where you do fight the enemies by yourself, but that's no problem. The areas look pretty nice and look explorable, especially with the option to use a map since the areas are large, but they're kind of linear. It doesn't really weigh down the game, it's more like why is it even there? But I barely used it since they just kind of automatically guide you to wherever you're supposed to go. Overall, gameplay is good and I like the full-scale war areas this game has. It's pretty solid. When you complete your mission to protect both Petrovich and Walsh, you find out that Dr. Cole was in Pompeii, so you go there, fight through the opposition and the Romans, and you find him trying to finish a painting of the volcano erupting. You fight some more opposition soldiers, head to the arena, and teleport back to the headquarters along with Dexter and Cole. Strinko somehow teleports to the headquarters and tries to talk to Cole. He asks him if it's wrong to alter the past to prevent something terrible. Cole says yes, and that dark days teach valuable lessons and define who we are, and as Strinko's last resort, shoots Cole in the head. He then walks up to both Morris and Dexter and tells them about Welsh and Petrovich, who are ancestors of scientists that discovered a way to code some viruses to seek out genetic coding, mainly DNA that's received from racial heritage. It was used to combat rare diseases, but their work was stolen by a lab assistant and sent to Middle Eastern scientists, creating a bioweapon that would target people of European descent. Terrorists smuggled it into the US and released it from a weather balloon all over Washington, D.C. Since the virus wasn't stabilized, it quickly mutated and spread throughout the world, killing almost everyone with European heritage. The death toll was around 2 billion worldwide, and 8 out of 10 people in North America were dead. It's also revealed that the opposition is a future version of Chronotech, and Strinko offers Dexter and Morris to join since they're always looking for new talents. This is basically just another cliffhanger. I feel like this was also leading into a sequel, but they were unable to make one. We don't know what Morris or Dexter decide to do, so I guess that's it.
So, what the hell do we do now, brother?
Apparently this was the studio's first game, and it's not bad. They did well. If they didn't have any budget constraints, they could have added more to it and it would have looked even cooler. Also, during the development of the game, their offices got flooded. There was a flood in Iowa back in June of 2008 that reached the Cedar Rapids and flooded their main and backup offices, but luckily they didn't lose anything. 8 Monkey Labs has moved on as just Marmoset, like the name of their engine, and they're still active to this day. While they don't really make games, they provide tools for real-time rendering, texturing, and baking tools. As for Darkest of Days in general, the story didn't really have much to it, but you can tell they had a good time making this game. Plus, if you beat the game, you can go back and replay levels with any weapon you want, and you can spice it up with some buffs as well. Overall, this is kind of a generic shooter and stuff, but I still had a good time with History Channel at 3 AM as a game.
You'd think with all this fighting we'd get a little futuristic R&R. Maybe send us to the great strip bars through history or something.
Well, that's it. Those are the 4 abandoned games I wanted to go over in this video. I had an alright time with these games, despite Shellshock 2 being boring as fuck, but yeah. It's fun to play some old gems every now and then, especially when you're raging in some new popular online game. Abandonware is cool and stuff, but I do have concerns for it in the future. Most modern games now have a heavy DRM protection, cloud streaming, and even single player modes require an online connection for the sake of anti-piracy. Now, DRM has been around for a very long time, with a prime example being games for Windows Live, though that's already been taken care of. If a game from the early console era is abandoned, it can easily be archived, but if a game made now is abandoned, the servers go down, everyone loses access, and it's almost impossible to play. Everything will be gone once the publisher ends support for said game or goes out of business. Now, this hasn't really happened yet on a greater scale, and it probably never will, but it's something to think about. However, there's some good alternatives. You can go on GOG.com, which has a lot of games that are DRM free, or, if possible, just emulate it. Although most of these games do have PC ports, so it's probably better to play it from there, but that's entirely up to you. As for the games shown in this video, if you want to give them a try, they'll be in the description below to download. But, it's been fun, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next video if I ever have the motivation to make one. Goodbye!